It is Friday, February 2nd, let's talk PlayStation. Hey guys, Ryan here. So before we get into the main episode of Let's Talk PlayStation, this news story broke out after I filmed this episode, and it's kind of a big news story. We really can't ignore something like this, so I thought I'd film this real quick to talk about that news story before we get into the main show. As you know, I record like Thursday nights to upload Friday morning, and this broke right after I finished recording, so we definitely got to talk about this. Anyway, the news story is Sony CEO Kaz Hirai is stepping down and leaving the company. He will be stepping down to a chairman position, and taking his place will be the current CFO, Kenichiro Yoshida, and he'll be taking the full position of Sony Corp CEO on April 1st, 2018. And this is kind of a big deal, and if you don't remember Kaz Hirai, obviously, he's been the CEO for the past 6 years, but before he took CEO of the entire Sony Corporation, focusing on every division, he was the head of PlayStation. Kaz Hirai's original title before CEO was Sony Computer Entertainment President and CEO, so he ran PlayStation, and he was one of the key people that really turned Sony around in recent years, because Sony was hemorrhaging a lot of money for about the past 10 years, and when he took the role in 2012, it was kind of a big step, not only for redefining Sony's vision and going with the one Sony thing that they were kind of doing, unifying all their businesses, but he was kind of at the forefront of re-envisioning the company's profit margins and things like that. He sold off the Vio PC business, which Kenichiro Yoshida was well behind, so that's why he's being appointed the new CEO. But it was also very important because, well, we had a guy that was going into the CEO position, and he was coming from PlayStation. Some people seem to forget that. The original PlayStation CEO went on to be the head of Sony entirely. So there was always this fear a lot, you know, before Kaz took full CEO, there was always this fear with people thinking, oh, you know, Sony's going to get rid of PlayStation, or Sony's going to sell PlayStation, they're not doing that well, they're going to stop making, you know, PS3s, because this was back when the PS3 was doing, like, bad, like, so around 2006, 2007, you know, people were pretty worried about that, but once Kaz took over, it was kind of like, oh, no big deal, this guy is going to take care of PlayStation, and he really focused on PlayStation, and helped making PlayStation one of the most profitable places for Sony. And so I just like to read one of his closing statements. Now this is in regards to Yoshida. He said, Mr. Yoshida combines a deeply strategic mindset with a relentless determination to achieve defined targets and the ability to take a global viewpoint, Hirai said in a statement. I believe he possesses the breadth of experience and perspective, as well as the unwavering leadership qualities required to manage Sony's diverse array of businesses, and as such is the ideal person to drive the company forward into the future. As chairman, I will of course offer my full support to Mr. Yoshida and the new management team, and do all I can to facilitate a smooth transition and ensure their future success. Together with the outstanding talent we have across the Sony Group, I will aim to build on the business foundations established by Mr. Hirai and execute further reform measures that enhance our competitiveness as a global enterprise and enable us to realize long-term profit growth. That, of course, was from Kenichiro Yoshida. My first priority would be to finalize our mid-range corporate plans starting in April, and together with our immediate business plans for the fiscal year 2018, and then move ahead swiftly with implementation. This is a hugely exciting time at Sony as we look to our future, and together with my management team, I intend to determine the best path for us to move forward and devote my full effort to creating a better Sony that captures the imagination of our many stakeholders around the world. Now, I will say, Kenichiro Yoshida just gave a very good PR statement, because we don't really know what the hell that entails, but apparently when he does take a role on April 1st, they'll be certainly taking a different initiative, and if, you know, you want the PlayStation approach to this, I wouldn't worry. Kenichiro was also at the forefront of doubling down on PlayStation, because they, you know, him and Kaz knew PlayStation was a driving force of most profits for Sony Corporation in recent years, so we'll see how he does, but this is definitely big news. Kaz was a big player with you know, not only Sony but PlayStation. You know, this was the guy that famously said the PS3 is $599 US. We'll never forget that. Thanks, Kaz. It's kind of an informal way to do this video. Can't record it normally, but either way, let's get into the main Let's Talk PlayStation. So, thanks, guys. If you've ever thought that there's not enough DualShock 4 colors, then you'll be pleased to know that just recently, this past week, Sony announced two new DualShock 4 colors, Midnight Blue and Steel Black. I really like the Steel Black one. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. The Midnight Blue one also looks very good. I'm not going to lie. Both of these look beautiful. What, you know, the Midnight Blue one kind of reminds me of the Uncharted 4 controller, if you remember that one. The Midnight Blue's like a slightly darker hue, maybe not just slightly, but certainly a bit more darker, but I like it a lot. It looks very nice, and if you like these controllers too, they will be available in the coming weeks. Now, moving on to a news story that's not really news, because it's like, who didn't see this coming? Like, he always openly talks about this all the time. But anyway, Polyphony Digital's Kazunori Yamauchi, creator of Gran Turismo, was recently talking to Japanese game site Game Watch in regards to the next GT, and he basically openly admitted, yes, I'm already working on the next Gran Turismo, which he just finished up GT Sport not that long ago, a few months ago. And GT Sport's doing quite well, but yeah, he openly admitted, yeah, I'm already working on the next one. Now, he didn't go into any specifics. It was a very casual conversation, so no specifics on... He even mentions notably, like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to call it GT7 or if I'm going to call it something else entirely. He was also probed about a sequel for Tourist Trophy, which was that motorcycle game on PS2. And a lot of people want to see a sequel to that, so he said, you know, I'm not sure, you know, we're not sure if we're doing anything like that. He's actually danced with the possibility of bringing motorcycles into just Gran Turismo altogether, which I would think would be a pretty healthy mix, you know, or a nice, because, like, I doubt Polyphony really is ever going to pursue a dedicated motorcycle game ever again, so this would sort of appease both parties that are looking for Gran Turismo and a sequel to Tourist Trophy. But either way, yeah, he's already working on the next one. Who didn't see that coming? This guy's going to work on Gran Turismo until the day he passes on, more or less, because it's his baby. But yeah, we'll see when he actually wants to, when he has something notable to show us. So we'll see Kazunori in like the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long it takes you. Now, moving on, we have 2 new patents that Sony has filed for motion controllers. Actually, one of them is about a year old, and then the other one was recently filed about a month ago, but these are both motion controllers, presumably for virtual reality support. So the one is based on finger placement tracking, and then the other one is a basic layout. It's got an analog stick, some buttons on it, things like that. This isn't entirely surprising, obviously. Sony is doubling down on VR big time with PlayStation VR. Obviously, they've launched this big major consumer product with PS4, and we know that they're heavily committed to it with all the games and developer support that they're doing for it, so that's all well and good. I think the interesting spin to look at this is that some people don't realize that, you know, we're using PlayStation Move with PlayStation VR. That's all well and good. It seems very obvious to me that PlayStation VR is a device that was made today, and Move controllers were something that were made, you know, 7, 8, 9 years ago. God, they were revealed 2009. I think they launched in 2009 as well. So it's been a long time that we've had the Move controllers, and it's quite evident that they were made in 2 different time periods, and they're just trying to cobble them together, you know, almost unnecessarily, I guess, or arbitrarily speaking. Like, you know, you can look at a game like Skyrim VR, and they really had to dance their way around locomotion, smooth locomotion in that game, where you can actually move without using teleportation. And the method that they came up with actually works quite well. It's where you actually press one of the move buttons in, and then you can just move the move wand forward to walk forward, or back to, you know, left, right. So that actually kind of works. But what you don't realize is that it's just, you know, they had it, yeah, it seems like that works, but they very clearly had to dance around that issue. Like, why do we not have a motion controller that has that, you know, the move wand up top, and it has an analog stick on top? They've just reused a peripheral that they already had on hand and had millions manufactured already, and plus a million, you know, tons of millions of people already had PS Move controllers in their households anyway. So obviously it kind of also benefited Sony in that manner to release PlayStation VR, and it was maybe a little bit easier for certain consumers to buy VR, going, oh, I already have a few Move controllers, so I'm already set on those, especially given the PlayStation camera. A lot of people actually bought PS4 cameras, so, you know, they just need to buy the core headset, even though now the core headset comes standard with the camera. But this makes a whole lot of sense to me. I would be intrigued, because sometimes when we talk about patents, it's always like, you know, a big multi-billion-dollar company has thousands of patents, and like only, what, 5-10% of them ever make it to actual consumers. Companies will always patent all their ideas and R&D and whatnot, and so a lot of the times you never see any of these things come to fruition. This is a situation where, totally believable. We could certainly see this to be a consumer product eventually. Maybe this is Sony's long-term idea for a PlayStation VR 2 on next-generation PlayStation hardware. That would make a lot of sense, considering you know, this is the infancy of VR today, and Sony could really mature it, and that's what we were talking about before whenever we talk about VR, is that it's in such a early state. But say, you know, 4 or 5 years from now, it can be an entirely different beast, and it can really mature and really grow. And maybe that's what Sony's preparing for. So we really have to talk about this one because I think it just is too interesting of a conversation to pass up. It really is. So recently, this past week, Polygon posted an article about Microsoft's current situation when it comes to exclusives, because the company is really struggling to release, you know, quality exclusives compared to what Sony's doing right now, because Sony has a lot of heavy hitter titles being released this year. Sony has the most first-party developers of all 3 console manufacturers, and they just consistently have been pumping out a steady stream of exclusives and compelling titles, and they have even more on slate. Sony's doing a really a really good job. So this article kind of touches on Microsoft's point of view right now, because they're really struggling. They're being outsold practically 2-to-1, 3-to-1 in some certain in particular territories, but worldwide they're sitting at roughly around 35 million units. We don't even know because Microsoft won't give out official numbers. And Sony's, you know, well over 73 million at this point. So yeah, they're steadily getting their asses handed to them. So the article kind of touches on what Microsoft can do in the future, and basically they also, so at the bottom of the article, the interesting part is that there's a rumors of acquisitions of Microsoft possibly acquiring a new company to put under them, and they can pump out, you know, more games or possibly exclusives that way. And what's interesting is that actual rumors from apparent sources cited in this article is that Microsoft is looking at a number of different situations, and they're possibly looking at EA for an acquisition, which would be nuts. Another one was PUBG Corp, which I think was probably the most probable, like the most likely, considering they already have an agreement there with PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds exclusivity currently, even though a lot of us are also expecting that game to come to PS4 at some point. But it would not be surprising at all if Microsoft can seal down a full deal or possibly seal an acquisition of the company. But the big one is EA. Another one they said they were also looking at was Valve, but these are focusing specifically on something like Valve or EA. That's a major one. Now, what's funny is that so many people are really discrediting the article right away, which I absolutely agree with, to be honest. Because, well, the one thing is that people are going, oh, it's Polygon. Like, okay, well, whatever, you know, Polygon's getting a bad rap or whatever. Then they're citing, you know, the writer. Oh, yeah, screw this guy. He's done some shit before. The only thing, here's the reason why I'm discrediting it, and why many other actual notable journalists are discrediting it, is the fact that if the sources were that reliable, why is this not making a major headline? Because the title of the article is all about Microsoft's exclusive problem. If you have a scoop on a possible rumor of Microsoft acquiring EA or Valve, I'm pretty sure you're going to run with that and make that the headline of your news story, and this is going to get eaten up and thrown around by every single news source and every single YouTuber around the globe. Because that's a big fucking deal if Microsoft were to possibly purchase EA or Valve. Those are major ramifications of the video game industry. And so, despite the fact that I'm very clearly agreeing with the fact that those things are very unlikely, it's still too interesting to not talk about in terms of, like, the possibilities of that, because that would be certainly pretty nuts. And that would definitely shake things up. You know, Microsoft's had a pretty tough go of it with the X1. If you look at the sort of timeline from 2013 up to now, they've actually done a lot of great things to try to win back consumer mind, and that's great. Only benefits consumers. That only benefits people that love Xbox and buy Xbox and play on Xbox. From 2013, they took away all the online bullshit. They took away all the anti-used game piracy bullshit, whatever nonsense before the actual system launched, which is great. Then they got rid of the Xbox Live Gold paywall for like online, for like streaming services, backwards compatibility, just a whole triage of things that I'm honestly forgetting at this point. They've actually done a lot. Lower the price of the system, obviously. Take out the Kinect camera. There's another one. But they've done a number of things. And what's, I don't want to say funny, but it is kind of hilarious that, like, they've done so much good stuff, but they just can't get over the hump. They can't move units, and they're really, really struggling. Well, not really struggling. I'm sure the company's fine with their performance, but, you know, they see someone like Sony doing twice as good as them. I'm sure it doesn't bode well for morale. And that's what Microsoft's always been known for, is they don't have a lot of studios under them. They often are very good at securing third-party deals. guaranteeing second-party exclusives and things like that, and just straight up writing a check, more or less. We don't always know the grounds of we don't always know what each contract entails, but that essentially is what it is, you know. Because certainly certain publishers don't need Microsoft's help when they, you know, when Respawn makes something like the original Titanfall, so that game just got locked down for the pure fact of it, the original one. So this conversation isn't totally outside the realms of impossibility for Microsoft to certainly acquire somebody, especially given the fact that the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, he's actually much more committed to the games and services division than, you know, than Steve Ballmer was at the time. Phil Spencer, for example, just recently got promoted at Xbox not that long ago. I mean, he was the head of Xbox. Now he's got a new title of, what is it, Vice President of Games, whatever the hell. I don't even know. He got promoted. So head of Xbox to even higher than that, more or less. He's got a bigger say with Microsoft's wallet, I would assume. So he's got a little bit more play money, I guess, to possibly work on the brand and build it and expand it. So Microsoft's commitment to games is very real. It's just the crazy possibility of possibly, like, you know, the source saying that they're looking at EA, and I don't even think that's a lie. It's not like I'm saying that's a lie or anything. I'm actually quite positive that Microsoft's probably pursued something like that. EA probably isn't in a situation where they really want to. They're actually somewhat of an overvalued company right now, and they're doing quite well for themselves. It's just the actual thought of them acquiring something like EA would be massive, because that would be, good lord, they would be worth 40, 45, somewhere around there, billions of dollars. So that's a lot of money. You know, Microsoft would have to take out of the bank for that, and you kind of wonder how would that even be worth it, considering Xbox isn't doing as well as it should be right now. But you know, that's the theoretical idea would just be so nuts, right? Because then Microsoft gets access to so many IP that would now obviously probably become Xbox exclusives given the next release of their games. You know, the next Need for Speed, next Battlefield. I mean, EA's got a lot of properties. Some people are looking at this this rumor and this article going, oh good, I want them to buy them so then they can kill EA. It's like, for the love of God, yeah, whatever. You hate EA, everybody hates EA, whatever. You don't want a company like EA to die, especially given the fact that so many publishers and developers go under nowadays. Let's have somebody float around to keep, you know, let's keep jobs in this industry. Let's keep some games actually getting released. I understand that you hate EA, whatever. I get it, but you certainly don't want them to go under. That would be catastrophically bad for such a big publisher like EA to go under. You want you want these big players to keep going at the very least. They do actually fund a lot of smaller developers too, which always helps. But either way, not trying to be a corporate apologist, but the point is that would just be massive ramifications. And so when you see that, and like that's what I was getting back to. They did so much from 2013 onward to try and move units, and nothing's just working. It would really be interesting, though, if they were to somehow pull off an acquisition like EA or Valve. Valve would also be a pretty big one. Maybe not as substantial to PlayStation, but it would certainly do very well for, you know, Microsoft's forward-thinking approach with unifying Xbox and Windows. I think that would make a lot more sense for them if they were to do some massive acquisition like that. But doing something like EA would certainly shake things up in a very interesting way for PlayStation, because that's locking a lot of PlayStation people out of, you know, major games that they thoroughly enjoy. But there's also a lot of like IPs under EA that they would have to consolidate with certain licenses, you know. I mean, because EA is a big publisher that has many developers under them and many IP under them, so they would have to consolidate like separate titles. Like, it would be a mess. It'd probably take forever for that, you know, deal to actually go down and actually get approved or whatever. It could actually fall through in a number of different ways. They would probably actually lose a number of games in the process of acquiring EA. Like, the ramifications would be nuts. But it is, I read that and I was like, what? EA? Oh my god. But I was like, oh, why didn't you make it the headline if that was like a major scoop, if these are very real sources? And they probably are very, again, I don't think it's a lie. But that's maybe why they're not running with a headline, is that, yeah, that they've had conversations, but certainly they didn't go anywhere. Like, the idea of this actually happening is I'd say probably very, very low. The likely scenario is PUBG Corp. They've already got that deal going on right now. It's a much smaller scale of a deal compared to something like EA or Valve. And, yeah, that would probably bode well for them. I'm sure they would like to have that game under their roster, considering how well PlayerUnknown's is doing. I'm sure that game is going to have a decent amount of long-term success in the coming years if they can capitalize on what they've built upon. But yeah, I think that would be a big one for Microsoft, because that's their problem right now, is that they have done so much good things, but they're just not moving systems. And I was actually planning on doing a video on that later, a separate video about why they're just stumbling so much and why it seems like it's such an uphill battle for them in regards to fighting against Sony, because as of right now, Sony is just in such a stable position right now, especially with their 2018. They've just got a lot of great titles coming out. So yeah, that's I guess a theoretical conversation. Those are just some of the news stories that I wanted to talk about with you all this week. So I got an update on the new videos and stuff coming out. I think I'm shooting for, and this is a very conservative answer, probably March is when the upload stream will start going on. And the plan is 2 new videos every week on top of Let's Talk PlayStation. So that's 3 uploads, but 2 actual new videos that you often don't see me do. I'm still filming a few new ones, but I'm starting to edit most of them all too. So I'm going to take a few more weeks to just get a lot of content built up so I know that I can reasonably keep the flow going, as I've explained. And I'm shooting for March, but that's a conservative answer. It could possibly be sooner than that. Just that's why I don't want to make any promises anymore, because I suck at those, as you are all very familiar with. So thanks a lot, guys. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.